From Chicago's CAN TV, this is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi there. Welcome to Chicago Newsroom on CAN TV. I'm Ken Davis. I have to be very quiet because I'm sitting in the highly secured room in the Senate office building where Mitch McConnell will be stepping in at any moment to read the most explosive FBI report ever written. It's so sensitive, so delicate that only those of us with the highest level of security clearance will be able to read it. Well, let's see. Oh yes, us and Sean Connery. Trump mailed him a copy last night. So we have the big news. Let me see what it says here. Kavanaugh's cleared completely. That's a relief. Now I can get out of this silly secured room. Yes, friends. A bunch of things we've been talking about for years, literally years, are all about to happen. That Roe-killing vote is about to be installed on the Supreme Court, probably today as we're recording this, or maybe 24 hours. In fact, the Republicans may have already installed him by the time you see this broadcast. The trial of Jason Van Dyke, the trial we've been anticipating for at least 3 years, is now finally over. It's in the jury's lap pretty much. I just was listening to the prosecutor's closing arguments in the car on the way down here just a few minutes ago. And that midterm election we've all been talking about since the night Donald Trump claimed victory, it's 33 days away as we're recording this program. And now they tell us the Democrats' enthusiasm level is tanking, the Republicans are surging. So are we in for another 2 years of unrestrained Republican control of every single aspect of our nation's government? Oh, and just for good measure, did you see that so-called debate last night with JB and Rauner? I guess I was wrong. The big issues are Pritzker's toilets and Rauner's drive for another $1 billion in taxes to go to people who want us to pay for their private schools. We need some expert help. So I've invited two great politics veterans to come to the table today and see if they can kind of calm me down a little bit. Sylvia Ewing is back on the show. Great to have you. Activist, political consultant, and so forth, and just sort of person who just knows everything about politics. Glad to have you
Well,
here.
next to the one who really knows.
Well, and there again,
Or a match that.
making her first triumphant appearance on Chicago Newsroom, Marilyn Katz, author, author, activist, political consultant, media consultant. You're both media consultants. I just need, like I said, I just need to be calmed down a little bit, okay?
Well, actually, we really need to have a crystal ball in our retinue.
right.
That would be very helpful.
It's really interesting doing a weekly show like this. The last 4 or 5 weeks have all been the same. It's like while we're doing the show, the world is exploding.
And changing.
And changing, right. So we just have to
Changing
say.
its axis, no less.
And I don't know if we can really calm you down because whenever there's a shift in power, people can either decide to say, okay, the world has changed, we're no longer on top, we're going to keep it rolling, or they blow things up.
There's that. Yeah. So I'd like to just start with Van Dyke, just because it's more, well, it's not really more top of mind, but it's happening right now. There, as we're speaking right now, the defense is doing its final argument, and the big development today, this morning, is that they have agreed, and I guess the Judge Gahn has agreed, to allow a second-degree murder charge to be, the jury can have that option. And it seems to me, as an amateur in this, and just from what I've watched, and I've been kind of glued to CLTV the last few days watching it, that isn't that giving the jury a kind of an interesting sort of second option that they can do a conviction, but without actually putting him in prison for 30 years or 40 years, and they can say, we know he did wrong, but not that wrong. I'm just wondering what you guys think about that.
I think that this is a case that needs to be looked at on multiple levels. Strategy by his defense team, what happened in terms of a young person's life, and the changes in how people look at attacks on people of color in this country. And I think for strategy, what you're seeing with the judge making that offer ties in well with Van Dyke asking for forgiveness, not permission, to speak for himself in a couple of interviews. And I think it's inappropriate in that it feels like guidance to the jury to say, here's an easier way out. And One of the reasons I don't like to be on juries is because it's hard work.
It is.
And you have to make hard decisions based on real factors. And that guidance feels a little soft to me. And finally, we're living in a world where people are just fed up, from Van Dyke to all around the country. These attacks, the man who was killed or who was shot in his home by a police officer, not killed, but shot. All of those things go together, and it's local, but it's not local. So that's my 2 cents. I don't know how the jury will come down, but I also think that the process that Rahm used to hold back the videotape is also one that is not, it doesn't bode well for transparency.
Marilyn, you were going to say something?
I think it's a little, from my perspective, it's a little more complicated. I actually
That seemed complicated, but go on.
It was
I
complicated
think it's
enough
even
for
more
me.
complicated, and I think it's even reflected in the mayoral election. I think the way people view the Van Dyke case, that's the first thing. And I think there's a split. I think represented by Lori Lightfoot and Gary McCarthy, remember, who was chief of police at the time of the killing. And I think
And Lightfoot
people,
went on to be the head of the police board.
right, and Lightfoot went on to be the head of the police board. And I think there really is a split in the populace about what everybody would say was a tragedy. What the cause of the tragedy and the culpability of Van Dyke, I think, is reflected in the second degree asked by the jury, which they think that he did obviously kill them, and they think it was wrong, but they think that it was also maybe partially justified in the role. And I think that is people I've talked to on the Northwest side and the South side, there is really a split. That's one. The second is a deeper issue. You know, in 1968, when Martin Luther King was killed, and Daley said, shoot to kill, shoot all looters and aim to kill people who did something, set fires. Everybody was shocked. Nobody had ever heard a mayor or anyone say, shoot to kill someone running away, a felon. It didn't matter. That was a shocking thing. It is now standard practice across the country that when a policeman feels in danger, they shoot to kill. They don't aim for the legs. They don't aim for the arms to disarm. They aim for the heart. And I've looked throughout. I've Googled. I've looked through police manuals, and I don't know when that policy started, but it is in fact fundamental to the problem that we're seeing, that you shoot to kill. And I think we need to
But
question
who
it.
are we shooting to kill?
Well, actually, the American Indians are the ones who are killed the most, then African Americans, then Hispanics.
People of color.
Oh, absolutely, people of color. But we live in a very racist society. So those are those three. And then, there are other kind of culprits. Laquan McDonald needed help as a young man. He and the 17 other wards of the state who were killed by the police in the last few years, 17 of them were wards of the state, and so that meant they were parentless and got no support at all, and they're out out on the street with clearly challenges. So I mean, so the second degree, I think, is much more not simply a ploy on the part of the judge or a slippery, but really reflective of what I think is going on in juries around the country.
But 16 times is something that's very hard for people to understand.
Oh, it's
and the defense tried to make a story that people could accept in light of something that's unacceptable.
It's totally unacceptable.
But we agree in that it's like things have changed, and they haven't, because you can watch any PBS documentary on race and attacks on men, and now I think what's changed is it could be on women as well. So this is a case with national implications, and there's a young generation that isn't going to take it and is very furious by what they see in terms of income in equity, in terms of mental health care, and Marilyn's spot on in terms of what Laquan McDonald needed and didn't have. But we live in a city with lead, where lead pipes and all of the behavioral and educational negatives that come from being exposed to that has been the norm because
Ken
of
will
politics.
remember
Yeah.
My first campaign was getting rid of leaded gasoline.
Right, and I just come back to that because we have
Right.
set the stage for lots of tragedy.
Yes.
Well, now, the defense, which, as I say, is as we're speaking at this moment, they're
Yep.
laying this out. The defense's principal argument is that Jason Van Dyke felt his life was in jeopardy. And because of that, and because he felt that he was being attacked, he had the right to respond with lethal force. And that seems, to most of us who've seen the video and everything, that seems so absurd on the face of it, but it's really the crux of police community relations at this point.
I think that's true, and Sylvia's right. It's not just here; it's around the country. It's in LA. It's in every Black Lives Matter. I mean, that's why it's a national movement. But I'm telling you, there is a split, and it's also a political split. And I mean,
and it's
I
more
think
than Jerry and Gary and Lori,
right.
too,
It is
right?
and when we look at Trump and the Trump vote, because this is not disconnected from that. The voters who voted for Trump, as a character, were white males and females, not working class, actually petty bourgeois, $70,000 average income. And if you watch the income, these are a group of people who feel threatened by any black person and any equality and the loss of white supremacy and white privilege. And you can't disconnect that from what's going on with who gets shot. The Trayvon Martin. Here is a black man walking in an upper class white community in Florida with a hood. He gets killed because he is seen as a threat.
It's all a continuation. We have more language for it now, and we have, a better understanding, and because of changes in media and communication, we can hear about it more. But for many people, the police are an extension of the mechanism that allowed folks to be lynched and to have a picnic while they did it. So we've got a long way to go. And when you add other societal challenges, mental health, stress, it really takes a kinder and a harder look than most people are willing to give.
Another thing that's happening in the background while we're recording this show today is that in South Carolina, they're dealing with 7 police officers who got shot. Right. 1 was killed. And in the Tribune today, there is a story talking with police officers, one who apparently is in a higher level of command, who says that one of the great fears that Chicago police officers have is that if Jason Van Dyke is convicted, that it's going to give people a sense that it's more okay to shoot police.
This is, I don't want to get really theoretical here, but whether we're talking about police violence, we're talking about counter violence, we're talking about the 2 guys killed randomly in Rogers Park. We're talking about gang violence and the fact that 500 people have been killed and 1,000 shot in Chicago. It is ironic, and as a society, we condemn this. What did we think when we've been at permanent war for 18 years? Where if a country says we don't like your policy or we resist your policy, we bomb them. I mean, so if we as a society model behavior that says the way you resolve a conflict is to kill someone and to show that you have greater armed might, why is it that we expect our children or our dissenters to react to situations in any other way?
Yeah, there's doing a lot of international travel, we have truly damaged our reputation as a place that believed in, truth, justice, and the American way.
Did you happen to see the UN laughter?
Well, we have.
There's Exhibit A.
And it's going down more and more, but there's still the complexity of race, the history of race, the legacy of race, right up to the Rolling Meadows judge who says you weren't a slave, and then there's more context to his conversation, which will, again, divide people on various sides. Race is always at the core, because we haven't healed that wound, and then you have a decline in who we are, and the people who've held power being incredibly frightened and confused.
Absolutely.
And the people who never had power the poor whites that Jesse Jackson and other people accepted and, you know, who understood
The Rainbow
that this,
Coalition.
you know, Fred Hampton, you know, that people understood that we're in this together. There is a huge divide there, so it's messy.
It is very messy. You know, I was wondering what you guys thought about Father Flager. His quote was, when the Van Dyke verdict, let's try that again, when the Van Dyke verdict comes down, if anything less, okay, let's try this again. When the Van Dyke verdict comes down with anything less than a conviction, the next day Chicago should shut down. No one should go to work, school, any stores, a complete shutdown to send an economic message of outrage. I can't help but think, you are aware, right, that you're living in Chicago where probably at least half of the population would be jubilant about Van Dyke getting off.
No, I don't think that's true.
You don't?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
I don't think that's true. I mean,
Not half, but some. And
there will be
would they
some.
be quietly jubilant? You know,
Well, that's
there's-
true. They're not.
so
They're not
there's-
going to be taken to the streets and
No,
celebrating.
but I also
right,
told.
that's
I mean,
true.
look, when we elected Harold Washington, only 13% of the a city's white population voted for him, and that was true again in '87. There was no change, but we are a different population, and the third, I would say, so we're a third, and a third of
Are
those.
we really? I keep
Yes.
thinking that the demographics have changed with the loss of African American.
No, we're about a third right now.
African Americans are still a third of the
Yeah.
city.
Well, and Latinos are really on the rise, but I think your point is interesting, or his point is interesting. I see that also as a way to say, I could choose to use this code, and I'm sorry to interrupt, that,
That's all right.
that don't burn stuff down.
Right.
Do something that
Economic
has,
boycott.
you know,
That's interesting because my response is don't promise what you can't produce.
Yeah.
well, see,
Yeah, I mean,
so-
I'm an organizer. So Friday I organized a demonstration immediately to respond to Kavanaugh, but I was very cautious because expectations are important. If I'm going to call a general strike, I want to know what's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, yeah, and we have
But
seen that. We've seen that a couple of times now.
But
with
I
these
but I
calls
think where
for-
he is right, and Sylvia's both right, and goes back to the original. Rahm, should he have really done this consciously, or whether he and Steve Patton thought they were just following the rules? The hiding or the lack of transparency on the Laquan McDonald tape was stupid. We are a sophisticated African American community that's very powerful, and it does have Jesse Jackson, and they do have at least more than a third of the city council. This was not Ferguson.
Well, and also we are a city where younger people, because look at us, you
We're
know,
not
and
young.
we're talking about Harold and
Right,
different
right,
stuff,
right.
and you know, and I did bring
Absolutely.
up that there are folks that are sophisticated, that are thoughtful, that are looking at different ways to respond,
Educated.
that have different conversations on Twitter that we barely understand. They are very truly woke. And some of them are more willing to work with others, and that's very powerful.
Yeah.
And some folks are just sick of it, sick of always having to explain and be take the high road. So, those voices and what they will do is what I want to watch. I'm tired. I want to support the next generation to fix the mess that we caused.
If I'd have known you were tired, I wouldn't have invited. The whole idea
Well,
was,
you know,
I'm tired,
I
and
know,
I wanted
I know.
you to.
You
But
can't
we
be
want-
tired.
We want those folks out there to.
But they are. They are. They are. I'm very encouraged by that. I mean,
I know,
see
I think
young
they
people all the
have
day,
it.
but
But they're not
and-
voting.
Yes, they will vote.
Well, this new NPR poll that showed that the Democrats are just giving
You
up.
know what? I am. First of all, let
The
me tell
worst
you,
part about it was that people under 30, not even 60%, are planning to vote.
that is such. Look, I don't trust polls, and I definitely don't trust commentators. I wrote in March 2016 that Hillary was going to lose, and it was very clear that she was going to lose because while all the polls were saying she had it, all the pundits were saying she had it, her entire margin was based in the 6 southern states that hadn't voted Democratic since 1960. In fact, by the way, you should know, going to Sylvia's point, the last time white people voted for a Democrat for president,
Kennedy.
right, more than 40%. More than 40% was John F. Kennedy in 1960.
Oh, yeah.
And that goes to the issue, and the thing that changed it, and this goes to Sylvia's point, was the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act of 1963-64. And
LBJ said we've lost the South forever or something, or
and it
for a
looks
generation
like
or whatever.
So, but this generation is changing. And when I look at the third, I look at millennials as very progressive. I look at the fact, I don't care what NPR says. Here's what I know. I know that 250,000 people showed up in Chicago to march, and they were predominantly white, even though the speakers were a rainbow. I do know that young women, and particularly women of color, are leading every social movement in this country.
Yeah.
So if you give people something to vote for, they'll vote.
My worry is, that is a wonderful, optimistic view, and I agree with the young people. I mean, my money is on them. But I worry about voter suppression, and I worry about every kind. It's like whack-a-mole. While we may have someone who seems like he can't lead his way out of a box in terms of President Trump, we also have insidious rules changes that are coming up on every front, including this public charge, which as we speak might happen, that will impact immigration, legal immigration, and
yes, did you love that?
Those families. And so, you've lived in Texas, and you've had all of your, you're a documented American or someone with papers, and now if you had a midwife, maybe you're no longer able to vote and a citizen. So those tactics and those approaches are really frightening.
So let's get to the bottom of this, and it goes back to what Sylvia was saying earlier. When you look at Trump and you look at, first of all, one of the things the Kavanaugh hearing showed was that, which is important to understand, is Trump is not a renegade. He is actually the pimple on the toxic body of the Republican Party. He is the pustule that expresses them in full. Lindsey Graham was very eloquent in his hideousness, in his right. But the point is that in case anyone is confused, all of what Trump is doing with voter suppression and with immigration has nothing to do with jobs. He can try to sell it to the working class and the middle class. Is making sure that white people control the vote as long as possible. And it goes back to, there's a wonderful book by John Baptiste called The Half Never Been Told, about race in this country. And it's important to remember, and not to go to ancient history, that until 1964, white people not only got to represent the votes of themselves, but in the South, in the country, all the slaves, all the black people they owned. And so that the outsized white vote could determine every constitution, every presidential election until 1964.
That's good history that young people should know.
They should know. We should be teaching.
They should know it, but it's a changing world.
So when you're faced, which everybody knew, that there is a demographic change and blacks and immigrants would be the majority by 2030, what do? You suppress voter registration and voter ability in black communities, and you try to lower the number of people of Hispanic and other origins.
Are you suggesting that young people are being suppressed?
When you try to suppress votes,
absolutely.
When you try to suppress votes in certain demographics, young people will be affected and their interests will be affected. Young people have no excuse to not go out and vote.
But in Wisconsin.
But in some places and in some ways, there are certainly barriers being put up.
In Wisconsin, you have to
do
use
that.
You can no longer use your student ID.
Student ID, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, so yes, the targeting of people of color, immigration laws to kick people out or keep them in the shadows, and in things like 29 states have passed restrictions on voting rights. 29.
This, I promise, will be the last reference I will make to being an older person today, because I'll try to move on from
You
that.
could dye your hair. and
I'll
then you
move
would-
on from that hang-up.
No,
but
show
it's
it. We
just,
need to show it.
I lived through, and so did you, a generation that looked very much like this generation looks today. If you recall, it was take it to the streets, it was revolution, it was we're going to redesign America in a completely different way, we're race neutral, we are blah, 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 blah. until they got their first job, had their first kid, and had to move out of the city to get to a better school and everything else.
I
and
disagree.
they all turned out to be
I disagree.
conservatives.
I think that's total
But many
BS.
of them, so there's a balance. Since you
Well, no,
disagree,
no.
there's a middle ground, because I do know radicals from that period who, especially white males, were able to turn in their radical card and get a new conservative card and write editorials. I had a friend who started writing editorials in the Tribune about things that were, 20 years ago he wouldn't have done. But there are also folks who stay strong and thoughtful. And I mean, I'm not trying to judge, but I am, that there are people who don't have any regrets about their beliefs and stick with them. But either way, it's the next generation that has to handle
yeah,
it.
but I actually think this is really a dangerous thing to say. I think it's a Forrest Gump thing, and it's just not true. And let me give you 2 examples. I mean, one, just in my personal life, I will tell you that the women in Chicago Women Take Action range from 16 to 85.
I said white men.
And, even white men. But I will tell you this, black men and black women and white women are better, and Latino women are better. But let me just posit this. In 1968, or 65 to 68, in Chicago, we were all children, and we forged relationships between us, marching in Marquette Park, et cetera, and doing welfare organizing and student organizing. When I came back in '83, I found the same group and was the core of the Harold Washington campaign. And then in 2002, when I organized the rally against the war in Iraq, at which Barack made his speech, this was the first demonstration by email. And the core people who I called on to produce those 5,000 people in a week were the same people I'd met in '68, who then became the core of Barack's Senate and presidential campaign. So I believe that the arc is long, and the notion of
Bends toward
involvement
justice.
Well, but we
with
have
a lot of
special
help, and I'm not
charmed
sure we
core.
get there.
We have a special charmed core of Chicagoans who are committed and strong and live their beliefs.
Yes.
But there are also folks who helicopter in and out, and in their youth are more radical, and as life didn't turn out the way they had hoped, I personally know, I can't speak from statistics, but I personally know people who shifted later in life, as I also know people who are right on, still going strong.
Here's what why I really think, that it's really important to find the other story. Forrest Gump is one of the most evil films I've ever seen.
This isn't Forrest Gump.
But it is. It's kind of like Forrest Gump who floats through life and happens to be at the right place at the right time, it succeeds wildly and becomes wealthy and lives forever. She, who is the child of sexual abuse as a girl and gets involved in politics, gets cancer and dies.
Right.
And gets AIDS and dies.
Right.
There is a mythology that really is part of voter suppression that says, really, politics and involvement are just a youthful fancy. You'll get over it. It's kind of like a disease like chickenpox.
Leave it to us professionals.
Leave it to us professionals.
Yeah, I agree with you. That is a dangerous narrative, and that's a fabulous analysis of it. We should have a film analysis show.
Yeah.
Let's do it. I love
There is a
film.
lesson there, but I still say that the trend of people who, and maybe their commitment wasn't as deep, that people, when they have values, there's a Chicago alderman who said years ago that that people were moving into the market, the then Randolph Street Market area, and there was an argument about keeping the 30,000 or so jobs at that time, and how do you live in alignment and get along well with your neighbors that are the new art galleries and hipsters. And he said, when their kids get older and they're tired of seeing somebody walking down the street with half a cow, they're going to push out this light manufacturing in this industry. And that happened. On the other hand, there are folks that say, I love an urban environment, Wicker Park or parts of Logan Square. I'm going to push my baby stroller and live in, next to my neighbor who does something, different. So all of that, we're going far afield, but it's a good chance to hear what older people have to say, because the true path to success is working next to each other. We're the youngest in the room. If they have a good idea, it makes sense. Where the
I love that.
oldest in the room is appreciated and it makes sense. That is our only way to handle the whack-a-mole of all of these things that are coming up to attack people who don't want authoritarianism in this country.
Okay, so let's try to, it being the bottom of the hour, let's take a little break and point out, excuse me while I cough here, and point out that we have just two absolutely fabulous guests with us today.
Two shy people.
Two very shy people. Yeah, that's right, yeah. Marilyn Katz is with us from MK Communications. She's an activist, an author, a political consultant, and just kind of an old friend who's been around for a while.
Very laid back.
Very laid back, just a laid back, mellow kind of person. And Sylvia Ewing's here, also an activist, as you can tell from both their voices. Also a consultant, political and media type person. And we're just very glad to have you both here today. We had high hopes for talking specifically about some of the things about the Kavanaugh thing, but it all really kind of blew up this morning. I mean, does anybody in America not believe anymore that Kavanaugh is going to be on the court? He'll probably be on the court this afternoon. So, well, tomorrow afternoon anyway. So, I mean, I suppose we could talk for a moment, but it's just going to make us even more depressed about what a Kavanaugh court will look like. There has been, Republicans have actually been raising the issue that Kavanaugh is not going to quickly vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. He's going to probably chip away at it for a few years and it'll still be around. What do you guys think? You think that the Republicans are going to move in quickly and just take care of this issue that they've been planning to get rid of since 1974 or whatever it was?
I think that the way this president moves in terms of I promised this and now here it is, whether it's crazy, whether it's planned, whether it separates children, that there would be pressure for a quick change. But the damage that has been done in the short and long term is huge. It's beyond one very important issue that's an incredible issue, a woman's right to choose. But just getting away with bullying, getting away with, I'll out-talk you and out-yell you, getting away with, being able to say my narrative and my story trumps all. All of those things are incredibly damaging. Kids, the hope that people may have, people who are survivors of these attacks, the damage is immense.
Could I do a little dramatic reading here?
Sure.
Tell me if you've...
And I wanted to let you share your part.
You may not have heard this before. I had one beer, right? One beer. How did you get home? I don't remember. How did you get there? I don't remember. Where is this place? I don't remember. How many years ago was it? I don't know. What neighborhood was it in? I don't know. Where's the house? I don't know. Upstairs? Downstairs? Where was it? I don't know. But I had one beer. I think, when I hear that, I think, well, actually, this is a good thing, Mr. President, that you said that, because you will have alienated an entire gender for the next 30 years. I mean, you want to talk about Johnson sitting down and saying, wow, the Voting Rights Act, we just lost white people for a generation. We just lost women for a generation or two. But I'm not sure I believe that. Because, I mean, I heard women on CNN this morning. I heard women on NPR talking about how this is not an important thing to them. And what's important is, is taking care of the abortion issue. So I'm not sure I believe it.
Wait. First, I wouldn't counterpose those two. Taking care from the right, the abortion issue. There are 20 to 30%. Look, can we stipulate?
Yeah.
For the last probably 50 years, there's 30% of the country that are right-wing, Christian, anti-choice folks. That's
unmovable.
There. Unmovable.
Yeah.
So when we continue to poll those 30%, big deal, big, no surprise.
So is there a countervailing 30% on the left?
Yes.
Is there?
So
who are those people? What is that?
Well, they're they're people who have a college education. They're working people who are in unions. They are black people. They are Latino people. They are women. They are a good...
And men as well.
And men, right, but to make up this hardcore 30%. And then there's about 30% that's in the middle, who are independents, who try to, who are not liberal on every issue, but in fact, on the issue of choice and abortion, 78% of Americans support choice. But let's talk about the courts for a minute. On choice. There is no choice in this country. There are 5 or 6 states. We're pretty much where we were in 1968.
Chipping
if you
away.
live, if you live anywhere between Wisconsin and Minnesota and California, you better hope you've got some travel money because you're not going to be able to find anyone who's going to do an abortion. So it is a tremendously important thing. I personally think, one issue I'm very involved in is in the Middle East with Palestine and Israel. And you've watched Trump, who has done terrible things in concert with Netanyahu, go back and forth on the issue. Very kooky, very kooky.
You mean the one state, two state
one
thing?
state, two state, and just like crazy all over the place. I believe that the Republicans think that if they totally outlaw, if they rule on Roe v. Wade, they are really going to be sunk because of the 78%.
Oh, you do? You think
Yes.
that's...
But
Well,
I
it'll be
think
interesting to see how it plays out. But the damage has been done in the
Right.
short term.
It's already been
is
done.
my 2 cents, and it might energize folks. It might depress people. But there are definitely people taking action, and those actions need to be strategic, thoughtful, and realistic. Because we're losing. If you're a progressive, you're thoughtful. You don't want fascism and any other isms. We're losing in the storytelling war because this is a president who will pivot, and he has been a reality show guy. This is his realm, and instead of bringing the discourse up where there is logic and discussion, we're bringing it down to a level where he can make it simple enough for people to temporarily go, oh, maybe that makes sense. And there's the 30%, I look at it as you have your choir. Those older and younger people are the choir. You have the people who are rabidly against any of this progressive stuff. And then you have folks who are like, make me care. And the storytelling part is making people care. The Middle East is important, but you know what's important that we're also terrible on? Climate change.
Well, yeah.
I'm working with Elevate Energy on that, which ties into the governor's race and a few other things.
That's another place, and she's right. So we see this is so complicated. They've already eviscerated everything at the EPA. And so our water, our air.
Which JB is good on articulating that.
He is. What they've done to the EPA nationally is a fundamental danger. But one of the things we need to talk about is while the Democrats have been really good on elections, if you read Jane Mayer's book, Dark Money, what the Republicans have been better at than anything is, for the last 50 years, as we discussed,
Controlling what's behind the scenery.
behind the scenery and also controlling virtually every media outlet in the country.
Slowly but surely taking over. That is huge.
It's huge. There is not.
Huge.
We have probably 4 places in the country with a neutral to liberal media outlet: Chicago, New York, Detroit, LA, San Francisco, Seattle. That's it. But all that vast is controlled by Republican, right-wing controlled media outlets. And I'm not just
And
talking...
the president making reporters the enemy and attacking them. You're absolutely right. So it's the organizations
So it's not
and the
only the
individuals.
narrative, but how the narrative
The
is delivered.
infrastructure.
And if the
All of
infrastructure is
that.
only delivering this one right-wing message, we are in tremendous danger.
I was watching Hannity last night, and he was just this close to saying that he'd already read the FBI report. I'm serious.
I'm
He
sure.
just-
But
And they
you
have
will
their
love-
talking points.
You will love the fact that Hannity made 5 Chicagoans his top enemies in his book.
Oh, is that right?
And the first 3 were me, David Axelrod. Thank you. I
congratulations.
wrote to David Axelrod and said, haha, I'm number one, you're number two. David and then Valerie. But, just say, so 2 Jews and a black.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Okay, this is completely off the topic. This is derailing it, but this is something you're the perfect people to ask about this. I was in a conversation recently with a couple of people, and we got into this, we kind of went down this alley of, are we at a point where surgical abortion is just not the thing
It's
that
a very
it
interesting
used to
question.
be, and is it really the hill to die on anymore? Because, I mean, medical, whatever those things are called, abortion, whatever, you know what I'm talking about. Morning after, non-surgical.
The technology has changed quite a bit.
Now, of course,
as the
they're
service has
still
been
very
harder to
much
find.
controlled and prohibited, but it's going to be a whole lot harder to control the distribution of a few pills than it is to control the construction of a surgery
That is
suite.
true, but I mean, we know that this is not about abortion.
Oh, of course we do.
It's about women.
Of course
So
we
I
do.
mean, I agree with you on one level. Every woman who's fighting this battle knows that it's about a control of her own body.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember there was a day in Indiana 2 years ago, when the country, the NCAA refused to play in Indiana because people were denied the right to have a wedding cake as a gay couple.
Yeah.
And the country went wild on the same day, on the very same day, literally the same day. A woman in Indiana was convicted of murder for having an abortion or a miscarriage. And nobody said shit, excuse me.
And there's also the young immigrant woman that was held. She came into the country for
Right.
an abortion.
Yeah, well,
so I mean, those issues get.
And let's not forget who the judge was.
That's right.
Right.
It was Kavanaugh.
It was
That's right.
Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a full. That I didn't even
You
think
wanna
of that
see-
as
you
I
wanna
said
see
it.
Yeah.
So that's what we can expect.
Right.
And this issue is, abortion is itself important, but it's also symbolic of what is
Yeah, I
going
get
on.
that. I totally get that.
But it's control. When we started this conversation, one of the things that I said, well, you can be frightened, but be frightened also about this, that as the world changes, the people with power have a hard time giving it up.
Yeah,
And when that comes back to a certain type of white man,
Yeah.
not all of them, but a certain type. And what will be done to hold on to that power by them and their co-conspirators is the scary thing.
So to go back to why I got flipped out at hearing a presidential alert yesterday.
I know! Holy cow!
It was because not only was it like the test thing, but it was like, we know where you are.
And we can
every
send you not just an alert, a government alert,
Whatever.
an emergency alert, a presidential alert. And also his appointees, I mean, we could go on about Trump, his appointees
Couldn't we?
that are cutting down, our protections from the weather service, AccuWeather guy trying to take over the weather service. There are things that only government can do, and government can do it well.
Well,
and
see, that's
it's
where
all
you're
under
wrong.
attack.
Everything can be privatized. We've seen it. We know that. There's nothing that can't be privatized.
Built on, and it's privatized on the back of what our money paid government
So
staff
you're
to build.
You're adding provisions. I'm just saying everything can be privatized. And when you have a private school, Bruce Rauner is going to raise $1 billion so that you can get money to go to that private school. But that's all right. Listen, it's now 43 minutes past the hour. Traffic and weather on the 44s, ladies and
By
gentlemen.
who? But no.
Yeah, and we have not talked about this mayor's race. I mean, come on. What's wrong with us? 3 political people from Chicago. We're not talking about it. Why didn't Chewy do it?
Why, what I want to know, and this may not be the answer you want because I worked with Ewing, why do we have all these old folks popping up saying they're going to run? I mean, where is the next generation of leadership?
What's wrong with old people?
I don't want to hear everybody from, and who knows who's in or out now, from David Orr to,
David Orr is now?
David
No,
Orr,
I
but
think
he said
he's-
for
he
2
said-
minutes.
Yeah.
Everybody had their 2 minutes of maybe it'll be me.
All right.
Do any of them have the new
You
ideas?
got to hand it to Ed Burke. He's the only one who didn't do that.
I'm sick of all of them.
The rumor is that he has a surrogate in. So
Chewy
Chewy didn't do it because of 2 reasons. because all his friends naturally told him not to do it. What they said is, we supported you, we rallied for you, we raised money for you in order for you to be a voice countering Trump.
Right.
We do not need you in City Hall.
Okay.
We need you in Congress.
Need you in
Yeah.
Congress.
And I thought,
that
was the mustache on the building, was that supposed to be for the mayor or for Congress? I was hoping that was for, because the mustache thing came from me at UIC, and then like, let's put, you know, the signal in the sky. So I just, in my mind, said that was for Congress.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. All right, so
And
However,
I
I
do think
will
Lori
say-
Lightfoot has important things to say. I think she has work to do in the African American community. I think, you know, you said McCarthy and Lori, so I'll go there. He has a constituency and he thinks that he's that guy. So maybe there will be people who come out for him. There are a range of people who deserve a listen, and whoever is going to have the best plan for Chicago has a lot of work to do and a lot of coalition building, and I don't know who that is.
the conventional wisdom is it's over. Tony's got it.
No,
Tony's going
I
to be
don't-
the mayor.
That isn't. I mean,
Well, I've always wanted her to run. Before she ran, you know, that's a reminder, because before she ran, I always thought she could win or Jesse Jr. I thought the two of them had the
how things
mindset.
change.
Yes, how things change. So Tony would be a great leader.
So Tony would be a great leader. The two people with experience in running anything of significance are Tony and Gary Chico. Gary Chico is a long time out. Tony's challenge is going to be, at this point, well, two. And I think, I mean, if I were a betting woman, which actually I am, I would probably say that Gary McCarthy won't be in the runoff.
I agree.
And Paul Vallis won't be. I would probably say the three people who may be in the runoff are Tony for sure, or Tony most likely, maybe Bill Daley for a variety of reasons, and maybe Gary Chico for another variety of reasons if he's the only Hispanic running. I don't know that we can to really handicap that yet, but Tony's there are 10 African Americans running in this race. And,
But also, Tony had.
But she has a crossover vote.
She has a crossover vote. I would posit that with new communities, Lori does as well. But Tony has a crossover vote and has quietly amassed her own organization. I won't call it a machine.
Don't call it a machine. I wish
I will not call it a machine. I will say an organization.
That is a very important thing to say. There's this kind of like a secretive, like, oh, she's a machine. There is no machine. Once you did Shackman, once you had no jobs to give out, you didn't have much
Once
of
you could call 311 instead of your precinct captain. But that organization and the work that she's done and the leaders that she's grown and helped to move into place.
That's right, like Kim Fox.
And her work, she's very good in the county. People forget, because we're also Chicago-centric, but she's very good for people outside of Chicago.
And she has tremendous respect in every community.
Her temperament is solid, and I think Lori's temperament is solid. Gary's temperament is solid. For temperament,
Gary
McCarthy.
Chico.
I thought you were talking about McCarthy.
Oh, gosh,
Gary
no.
McCarthy is a thug.
His temperament is solid. So I don't know, but I just wish. Do we always have to look back?
Yeah.
Do we always have?
Look, I
there's
think
no
this-
sustainability in looking back.
But here's what I think. I think no matter what, whether it's Tony, this is a 4 or 8 year mayor at most likely 4 years. And the very shortness of time, the younger ones, Amaya and Yaya, other folks, Lori herself, probably need more seasoning and more organization building. They don't have a base.
Organization building is key.
Well,
All right, so
a couple
we'll come back on
observations.
that.
First of all, I was there when Mayor Daley opened the 311 Center, and I remember standing there thinking, this is a game changer, right? This is going to change this city forever, and it did.
Right.
Because, I mean, you still have power as an alderman, but you don't, and as you say, a ward committeeman and all that, you don't have the
You don't have very much power.
You just don't have that kind of power anymore, because
by
people
the
can go
way-
right through. And may I say, the other thing was, I also was present the other day at Tony Preckwinkle's announcement down in Hyde Park, and that was an event. I mean, that was one hell of an event. It was just packed, and
Well, a love fest, I'm sure.
And the history, it was the same room that Harold Washington announced in, and so on and so forth. And it was just hot and sweaty, and just like like it felt like it was 40 years ago.
Yeah, well, that's a problem.
And I know, and it also, I was going to say, it also felt like it was 40 years ago because the candidate could have been there 40 years ago. And as you say, it's like,
So next time.
I'm getting really kind of tired of people of my age not
So
giving it up.
we should see this
Yeah,
as
but
a-
I do. Oh, how can we miss you if you won't go away? Is what somebody once said.
Yeah.
But I do think that Tony's ability to manage and lead
Yes.
and, make
And
room
unite.
for young people
And unite at this moment.
is overcomes youth, if you want to put it that way. But a funny quick anecdote. I was in the room because of Hadia Pendleton's family when Rahm announced his run, against Chewy. And it was crickets. There was no love. There was no, and even election night when Chewy lost, we partied, and everything felt. I'm here because I have to be. I'm here because of maybe fear. There wasn't, and even staffers, as he exits, I'm not going to indict all of the people who I'm sure work hard, but you never saw like the folks who stay around, who loved him, who wanted to help him, who would, stand by him.
I can think of one or two.
Yeah.
He's got a couple friends. I mean,
So this is,
I don't know.
this is another one of these questions that I've just been aching to ask you guys. Is it possible? Now, this is my own theory. Rahm Emanuel is a master politician. He knows how to do stuff. And he probably the first thing he did when he got up in the morning was look at the overnight polls to see how he was doing. And he knew he wasn't doing very well. And he probably knew when he got reelected that he was not going to run again because he could see that it wasn't going to work out. He probably knew for the last 3.5 years that he was not going to run again. But as a good politician, he was smart enough not to ever let on because then he'd be lame duck.
I don't agree. I think that he had a moment, let me just say quickly, he had a moment of his Mr. Rogers sweater, I'm trying to be nicer, I'm trying to be more open. I think his family is ready for him to step away from that. I think that his changing administration was part of it, and things that are coming out about school closings, about the lead pipes, environmental things. I think there are a lot of issues that are going to be hard for anybody to govern around. And if you were one of the people who helped to make any of them happen, you don't want to be in the room.
That's right. And
I mean, I think Ron, up to the last minute, was divided. Really, and not for just ego reasons. I mean, I think the ego is his worst enemy, but I think Ron really wanted to finish an agenda. He really would have preferred to stay for
and finish
Elon
strong,
Musk.
and to finish strong.
And the funny thing about him, and I have said this to him, so I'm not saying anything out of school, and I've said it to his staff, the fact is that Ron, most of my time in doing joint events with him has been on the South and West Side. Bringing grocery stores, bringing housing. He's invested a lot, but he is his own worst enemy.
Yes, he won't listen.
And his inability to let other people give him credit rather than sucking and stating all the credit himself made people who should be really grateful and really feeling like partners.
so where are the Marilyns that are around him? Where are the people?
Well, he listened to them. There is a woman, I don't know why she left, Janie Roundtree, who was very thoughtful about violence, but was also around when the Laquan McDonald tape was stifled. He brought in people from out of town, early on, and forgot this isn't Washington. I wish him luck. I hope he figures out something to do with the rest of his life that isn't running the city of Chicago.
In history, going back in history, boys and girls, there was this guy named Lou Palmer, and he did a plebiscite because he wanted to clear all the black candidates out of the way so Harold Washington could do it. Is there anybody who's going to be doing the same kind of thing for anybody, for any other groups? Is there somebody working out there right now saying
Laura
you
Washington
have got to get
called
out of this?
for it. She called for something like that, or at least conversations in a column a while ago. I don't know, and I don't know with Tony's reach, there could be conversations. I just don't know who would be the convener.
But Tony cannot talk to Willie Wilson.
That's right.
Tony cannot talk to.
Well, Willie's going to run because he's
Dorothy.
allowed to run, and I see his signs on the South Side.
Yeah.
Other people can, though. Other people can talk to Lori. Other people are talking to Lori and Willie and Ford and LaShawn, you know.
And is Dorothy Brown still running?
Well, that's what I said, Dorothy Brown.
I
mean,
will talk to Dorothy Brown.
Dorothy Brown is polling at like 10%.
Of course she is. But
Dorothy,
look,
don't do
so wait, who was the biggest? The biggest straw was Gary McCarthy, followed by Willie Wilson. That's ephemeral. It's going to go away. But
Yeah, but no, Willie Wilson did 11% or something in the last election.
Of course he did in the last election. Let's look. It was Chewy and Rom and Willie as the
And
leading,
it was changing
and-
Chewy's narrative to somebody that you wouldn't even know if you knew him for 30 years.
And
because
let's be very
the
real. I
story
mean, one of
wasn't
the things
told.
that Tony is going, which is a very important thing, there is a growing split between the Latino and the Black
Well,
community.
Chewy and Tony,
That's
a big deal. Yeah.
And so Tony is one of the few people who actually could overcome, one hopes, that incredibly important and dangerous split between the two communities. So I was not surprised that Willie, in the face of Rom and Chewy, that the Black community.
Because the money that went out and the messaging that went out over and over and over were people who actually knew Chewy asked, well, is he in a gang?
Right.
You know, we just lost on that front tremendously. I would say that we gave that election away
that's true.
by trying to go after people, going back to what you said, the thirds and the thirds, who would never, the police were never going to endorse
So
him.
I want to go back to this question of
We only got like
Ronner.
a minute, so we had
I
to
know.
go quickly.
But one of the things that happened is also, Ronner won not because the Republican vote in Chicago or even really around the state grew. The Democratic vote shrunk. It just stayed on. They didn't like Pat Quinn. In the primary last year, in the February election, people didn't like Ron, and they just wanted to not vote for him. But they were not, in fact, partly Chewy lost it, but part of it was a lot of people who said, oh, wait a minute, right? He may lose. There's nobody else I want. So it was definitely a lesser of two evils kind of an election. Kind of like, I really don't like Ron, which is why he didn't get more.
You know, we just have seconds left, but is Chicago governable? Can a good mayor run this city? Or is it just becoming...
Everything is governable when you have transparency, when you have respect and reality checks and understand resource allocation. That's a fancy pants way of saying with the right people who will listen to others and not have to take claim or, you know, may have to compromise. It has to be.
That's a great place to end. That's a perfect place to end. See, like old pros, we're bringing it in right on time.
Could you stop using that word old so much?
Well, you know.
I meant in the best way. Marilyn Katz, writer, activist, political consultant, and of course the Sylvia Ewing, also an activist and consultant of all
Speaking
sorts.
only on behalf of
Speaking
myself.
only on behalf, both of them speak
Right,
only on behalf
only.
of themselves. Yeah.
Make that clear.
Because they speak. That's what they do for a living. They speak. I'm Ken Davis saying thank you to these guys for being here today, and thank you for watching. Remember, you can go to this address anytime to see any of our shows at any time, or chicagonewsroom.org, and we hope you'll do that because there are some pretty decent shows back there. Hundreds of them, as a matter of fact. We'll see you next week with another program, which we don't know what it is yet, but we'll have something by next week, I promise. See you later. Bye-bye.